Welcome to Cheating Tales Lab. We hope you enjoy the story. Now, let's begin. Sarah Matthews stood in front of the full-length mirror in the master bedroom, smoothing down the front of her crisp white blouse. At 32, she exuded an air of polished professionalism, her auburn hair pulled back into a sleek ponytail. As a physical therapist at one of the city's most prestigious clinics, she had worked tirelessly to build her reputation over the past decade. Now, with an exciting opportunity on the horizon, she felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension coursing through her veins. Taking a deep breath, Sarah steeled herself for the conversation she was about to have with her husband, Tom. She knew he might not understand the importance of this upcoming trip, but she was determined to make him see reason. With one final glance in the mirror, she turned and made her way downstairs. Tom Matthews, 35, sat at the kitchen table, his brow furrowed as he pored over a set of blueprints. As a skilled construction foreman, he took pride in his attention to detail and his ability to bring architectural visions to life. He looked up as Sarah entered the room, a warm smile spreading across his face despite the fatigue evident in his eyes. "Hey, Han," he greeted her, pushing aside the papers. "How was your day?" Sarah returned his smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "It was good," she replied, her tone carefully measured. "Listen, Tom, there's something I need to talk to you about." Tom's smile faltered slightly, sensing the seriousness in her voice. "Sure, what's up?" Sarah took a seat across from him, her fingers unconsciously playing with the edge of a placemat. "I've been offered an incredible opportunity," she began, her excitement seeping into her words despite her efforts to remain calm. "There's a week-long professional development retreat in Aspen next month, and Dr. Evan has personally recommended me to attend." Tom's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Aspen? That sounds expensive," he said, a note of concern creeping into his voice. "And a whole week? What exactly is this retreat about?" Sarah leaned forward, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "It's a chance to learn cutting-edge techniques from some of the best in the field," she explained. "I'll be able to showcase my expertise in innovative stretching techniques. This could be huge for my career, Tom." Tom listened, his expression growing increasingly troubled. He ran a hand through his short brown hair, a habit Sarah knew signaled his discomfort. "I don't know, Sarah," he said slowly. "We've been saving up for those home renovations we talked about. A week in Aspen doesn't exactly fit into our budget right now." Sarah felt a flicker of irritation at his response. She had expected some resistance, but she had hoped he would be more supportive. "This isn't just some frivolous trip," she countered, her tone sharpening. "It's an investment in my future, in our future. The connections I could make there could lead to amazing opportunities down the line." Tom sighed, pushing back from the table slightly. "I understand that, but we have responsibilities here. The house needs work, and we've been planning these renovations for months. Can't you attend a local conference instead?" Sarah stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the tile floor. "You don't get it, do you?" she snapped, frustration bubbling to the surface. "This isn't just any conference. It's an exclusive opportunity. Dr. Evan doesn't recommend just anyone for these things." As she spoke, Sarah moved to the corner of the kitchen where her suitcase stood propped against the wall. She began rifling through it, double-checking her packing list. Tom's eyes narrowed as he took in the sleek, expensive-looking luggage, certainly not their usual practical travel gear. "When did you get that suitcase?" he asked, suspicion coloring his tone. Sarah barely glanced up. "Oh, I picked it up last week. I needed something more professional for these kinds of events." Tom stood up, moving closer to inspect the contents of the suitcase. His eyebrows furrowed as he caught sight of several tags still attached to what appeared to be new, high-end workout clothes. "And all of this?" he questioned, gesturing to the items. "These don't look like your usual work outfits." Sarah straightened, a defensive edge creeping into her posture. "It's a high-level retreat, Tom. I need to look the part. You know how important appearance is in these professional settings." Tom crossed his arms, his earlier concern morphing into clear skepticism. This all seems a bit much for a professional development retreat, Sarah. And you said Dr. Evan recommended you personally? Isn't he the one you've been working late with on that new patient program? Sarah's eyes flashed dangerously. What exactly are you implying, Tom? She demanded, her voice low and tense. I'm not implying anything, Tom responded, though his tone suggested otherwise. I'm just finding it hard to understand why you need to spend a week alone with your boss in Aspen for what you claim is professional development. The tension in the room ratcheted up several notches. Sarah slammed the suitcase shut, whirling to face Tom fully. I can't believe you're being so unsupportive, she exclaimed, her voice rising. This is a huge opportunity for me, and all you can do is question my motives and my integrity. Tom held up his hands in a placating gesture, but his jaw was set stubbornly. I'm just trying to understand, Sarah. This all seems to have come out of nowhere, and it doesn't add up. We're supposed to be a team, making decisions together. Instead, you're packing for a trip I knew nothing about until now. Sarah's face flushed with anger. A team? Is that what we are? She retorted bitterly. Because from where I'm standing, it feels like you're trying to hold me back. I have ambitions, Tom. I want to grow in my career. If you can't support that, then maybe we have bigger problems than just this trip. The words hung heavy in the air between them. Tom stared at Sarah, hurt and confusion warring in his eyes. For a moment, it seemed like he might say something to bridge the growing chasm between them. Instead, Sarah turned away, grabbing her suitcase roughly. I need some air, she muttered, storming out of the kitchen and up the stairs, leaving Tom standing alone, bewildered and increasingly suspicious in the wake of their heated exchange. As the sound of the bedroom door slamming echoed through the house, Tom sank back into his chair at the kitchen table. He rubbed his temples, trying to make sense of what had just transpired. The Sarah he had just argued with seemed like a stranger, defensive, dismissive, and utterly unwilling to consider his concerns. They had always been a team, supporting each other's dreams and making decisions together. When had that changed? Tom couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this retreat than Sarah was letting on. The expensive new luggage, the designer workout clothes, the dismissive attitude towards their carefully laid financial plans. None of it aligned with the practical, considerate woman he had married. As the minutes ticked by, Tom's mind raced through recent memories, searching for clues he might have missed. Sarah's increased work hours, her constant texts and calls with Dr. Evan, the subtle changes in her appearance and attitude, all of it suddenly took on a new, unsettling significance. Upstairs, Sarah leaned against the closed bedroom door, her heart pounding. She hadn't meant for the conversation to escalate so quickly, but Tom's questioning had caught her off guard. A mix of guilt and defiance swirled in her chest as she replayed their argument in her mind. Part of her knew that Tom's concerns were valid. They had always been careful with their finances, planning for their future together. But lately, Sarah had felt suffocated by the predictability of their life. The retreat in Aspen represented more than just professional development. It was a taste of the excitement and luxury she had begun to crave. As she moved to the en-suite bathroom, intent on washing away the stress of the confrontation with a hot shower, Sarah caught sight of her phone on the nightstand. The screen lit up with a new message notification, Dr. Evans' name flashing briefly before fading to black. Sarah hesitated, glancing towards the closed door. She could hear Tom moving around downstairs, probably trying to process what had just happened. With a small sigh, she picked up the phone, quickly typing out a response to her boss before stepping into the bathroom. Under the stream of hot water, Sarah tried to quiet the voice of guilt in her head. She told herself that Tom simply didn't understand the pressures of her career, the need to seize opportunities when they arose. But deep down, she knew she was crossing a line, one that might irreparably damage the foundation of trust in their marriage. As Sarah showered, Tom sat at the kitchen table, staring at her phone she had left behind in her haste to get away from him. He noticed it kept lighting up with notifications, each one sending a spike of unease through his gut. The trust between them, once unshakable, now felt fragile and strained. With each passing moment, the distance between Sarah and Tom grew, not just physically but emotionally. The seeds of doubt and betrayal had been sown, setting the stage for a confrontation that would shatter the life they had built together. The gentle hum of the shower filled the upstairs bathroom as Sarah let the hot water cascade over her, hoping it would wash away the tension from her argument with Tom. Downstairs, Tom sat at the kitchen table, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The sound of Sarah's phone repeatedly buzzing on the counter finally broke through his troubled thoughts. Tom glanced at the device, watching as notification after notification lit up the screen. Each flash seemed to taunt him, hinting at secrets just beyond his reach. He had never been the type to invade Sarah's privacy, believing that trust was a cornerstone of their relationship. But now, with suspicion gnawing at his insides, he found himself wrestling with a moral dilemma. "This isn't right," he muttered to himself. "I shouldn't even be considering this." But the persistent notifications continued, each one feeling like a hammer blow to the foundation of trust he had believed was unshakable. With a deep breath, Tom made a decision that would irrevocably change the course of their marriage. His hand trembling slightly, Tom reached for Sarah's phone. A mix of guilt and determination warred within him as he picked it up, hesitating for just a moment before unlocking it with the passcode he knew by heart, their anniversary date. As the phone's home screen appeared, Tom's eyes were immediately drawn to the messaging app, where a string of unread messages from Dr. Evan awaited. His heart pounding in his ears, Tom tapped on the conversation, telling himself he would only look at the most recent messages, just enough to put his fears to rest. What he saw instead made his blood run cold. The screen filled with a series of intimate exchanges between Sarah and Dr. Evan, detailing not just their ongoing affair, but also their plans for the upcoming trip to Aspen. Tom's vision blurred as he read message after message, each one driving home the painful reality of his wife's betrayal. One message from Dr. Evan stood out starkly. "Can't wait to review your stretching techniques in the hot tub." Tom doesn't suspect a thing, right? Tom felt as if he had been punched in the gut. The casual dismissal of their marriage, the mockery of his trust. It was almost too much to bear. His hands shaking more violently now, Tom quickly navigated to the email app, forwarding the incriminating messages to himself. He knew he would need evidence, though the thought of needing proof of his wife's infidelity made him feel sick. Just as Tom finished sending the email, he heard the shower turn off upstairs. Panic surged through him as he realized Sarah could come downstairs at any moment. Quickly, he placed the phone back where he had found it, trying to arrange it exactly as it had been. Tom's mind raced as he heard Sarah moving around upstairs. How should he confront her? Part of him wanted to explode with anger, to demand immediate explanations. But another part, the part that still clung to the hope that there might be some explanation, some way to salvage what they had, urged caution. Taking a deep breath, Tom decided on a calm approach. He would give Sarah one chance, one opportunity to come clean and explain herself. It was more than she deserved, he thought bitterly, but he needed to know if there was any shred of the woman he had married left in her. Sarah descended the stairs, her hair damp from the shower, wearing fresh clothes. She paused at the bottom, noticing Tom's intense gaze fixed on her. Something in his expression made her falter, a flicker of unease passing across her face. "Sarah," Tom began, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him, "we need to talk." Sarah approached cautiously, sensing the shift in atmosphere. "About what?" she asked, trying to keep her tone light. Tom met her eyes, searching for any sign of the woman he thought he knew. "I think you know what," he said quietly. "I'm giving you one chance, Sarah. One chance to be honest with me about what's really going on." Sarah's facade of nonchalance cracked slightly, a flash of panic crossing her features before she schooled her expression. "I don't know what you're talking about, Tom," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Don't," Tom interrupted, his calm demeanor slipping for a moment. "Don't lie to me. Not anymore. I know about you and Dr. Evan. I know about the affair." Sarah's face paled, her eyes widening in shock. For a moment, She seemed at a loss for words, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, her expression hardened. "You went through my phone," she accused, her voice rising with indignation. "How dare you invade my privacy like that?" Tom laughed humorlessly. "That's what you're upset about. Your privacy." He shook his head in disbelief. "What about our vows, Sarah? What about the trust we built over years?" Sarah's defiance seemed to crumble for a moment, guilt flashing across her face. But it was quickly replaced by a cold, almost cruel determination. "Fine," she spat. "You want the truth?" "Yes, I've been having an affair with Evan for 6 months now." The confirmation, though expected, hit Tom like a physical blow. He stumbled back slightly, gripping the edge of the kitchen counter for support. 6 months, he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah, seemingly emboldened by her admission, pressed on. "Yes, 6 months. And you know what? I can't believe how oblivious you've been. Always so focused on your work, on our comfortable life." She practically sneered the word. "Did you ever stop to think that maybe I wanted more? That maybe your boring, predictable lifestyle wasn't enough for me?" Each word was like a dagger, piercing through the shock fog in Tom's mind. He stared at Sarah, barely recognizing the woman before him. "How can you say that?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "We built this life together. We had plans, dreams." "Your plans, Tom. Your dreams," Sarah cut in. "What about my ambitions? Evan understands that. He pushes me to be better, to want more." Tom straightened, a surge of anger finally breaking through his shock. "And this trip to Aspen? I suppose that's all about your career development, right?" Sarah had the grace to look slightly ashamed for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "It's an opportunity, Tom. One I'm not going to pass up just because you can't handle it." "Handle it?" Tom's voice rose for the first time. "You're having an affair with your married boss, Sarah. You've been lying to me for months. How exactly am I supposed to handle that?" Sarah moved towards the stairs, towards her packed suitcase. "I don't expect you to understand," she said coldly, "but I'm going on this trip. If you can't accept that, then maybe we need to reevaluate this marriage altogether." Tom watched in disbelief as Sarah began to gather her things. "If you go on this trip, Sarah, we're done," he said, his voice low and firm. "I mean it. This is your choice, your marriage or your affair." Sarah paused at the door, her hand on the handle. For a brief moment, Tom thought he saw a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. But then she turned, fixing him with a hard stare. "Face it, Tom," she said, her voice laced with cruel finality. "You're just not ambitious enough for someone like me. Evan understands my worth." With that, she wrenched open the door and stepped out, leaving Tom standing alone in the wreckage of their shattered marriage. The slam of the door echoed through the house, a finality to it that seemed to mark the end of everything Tom had believed in. He stood there, rooted to the spot, as the sound of Sarah's car engine starting and then fading away reached his ears. Tom's mind reeled, trying to process the enormity of what had just transpired. The woman he had loved, trusted, and built a life with for years had not only betrayed him, but had done so with a cruelty he never could have imagined her capable of. Her parting words rang in his ears, each syllable a knife twisting in his heart. "You're just not ambitious enough for someone like me. Evan understands my worth." The words played on a loop in his head, mocking him, challenging everything he thought he knew about their relationship. Tom stumbled to the couch, collapsing onto it as the full weight of Sarah's betrayal crashed over him. Hours passed, the light outside fading as evening turned to night. Tom remained on the couch, his mind a chaotic whirl of memories and questions. How had he missed the signs? Were there warning signals he had overlooked in his trust and complacency? The Sarah he thought he knew seemed like a stranger now, replaced by someone cold and calculating. As the shock began to wear off, a new emotion started to take hold. Anger. Anger at Sarah for her betrayal. Anger at Dr. Evan for his part in destroying their marriage. And anger at himself for being so blind. With this anger came a resolve. Tom knew he couldn't just sit back and let Sarah walk all over him. He needed to protect himself, to gather evidence, to fight back. The first rays of dawn were creeping through the windows when Tom finally stirred from his position on the couch. He hadn't slept a wink, his mind too busy formulating plans and strategies. As he moved, every muscle in his body protested, stiff from the hours of inactivity. Tom shuffled to the kitchen, mechanically going through the motions of making coffee. As the rich aroma filled the air, he found himself staring at the phone in his hand, thumb hovering over a contact he hadn't called in years. Mike Johnson. Mike had been a close friend in college, and they had kept in touch sporadically over the years. Tom knew that Mike had become a private investigator, specializing in infidelity cases. The irony wasn't lost on Tom that he now found himself in need of such services. With a deep breath, Tom hit the call button. The phone rang several times before a groggy voice answered. "Hello, Mike, it's Tom. Tom Matthews. I need your help." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Mike's voice came back, more alert. "Tom, it's been ages, man. What's going on? You okay?" Tom swallowed hard, the reality of his situation hitting him anew as he prepared to say the words out loud. "Not really, Mike. My wife, Sarah's having an affair with her boss. I need advice on gathering evidence. Legally." Mike's sharp intake of breath was audible. "Shit, Tom. I'm so sorry. Look, why don't you come over? We can talk face to face. This isn't the kind of conversation you want to have over the phone." An hour later, Tom found himself sitting in Mike's modest home office. Mike listened intently as Tom poured out the whole sordid story, his face growing increasingly grim. When Tom finished, Mike leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I get why you want to gather evidence, Tom, but I need to warn you, revenge isn't always sweet. It can consume you, turn you into someone you don't recognize." Tom nodded, acknowledging the warning. "I appreciate that, Mike, but I need to protect myself. Sarah's already shown she's willing to lie and manipulate. I need to be prepared." Mike sighed but nodded. "All right, I'll help you document the affair discreetly, but promise me you'll think carefully before you use any of it. Sometimes the high road is the best path, even when it's the hardest to walk." Tom agreed, and they spent the next hour discussing legal and ethical ways to gather evidence. Mike provided Tom with resources and contacts, including the name of a reputable divorce lawyer. As Tom left Mike's house, he felt a small sense of relief. He had a plan now, a course of action. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Tom's next stop was the office of Sandra Patel, the divorce lawyer Mike had recommended. The consultation was a sobering experience, as Sandra laid out the realities of divorce proceedings, especially in cases involving infidelity. "Evidence is crucial," Sandra emphasized, her tone professional but sympathetic, "especially if there's any question of financial impropriety. Have you reviewed your joint finances recently?" Tom shook his head, realizing he had been so focused on the emotional betrayal that he hadn't even considered the financial implications. Sandra's words sparked a memory: Sarah's dismissive attitude towards their budget when discussing the Aspen trip. That evening, Tom found himself poring over bank statements and financial records. What he discovered made his blood run cold. There were irregular transfers from their joint account to an unknown savings account, sums that didn't align with their agreed-upon budget or spending habits. Digging deeper, Tom uncovered a trail of financial discrepancies that led back to the physical therapy clinic where Sarah worked. It appeared that she had been siphoning money from the clinic, likely to fund her lavish affair with Dr. Evan. The discovery of Sarah's financial deceit added a new layer of betrayal to Tom's pain. It wasn't just their marriage she had violated, but their financial security and her professional ethics as well. In a moment of cold anger, Tom made a decision. He anonymously reported the financial irregularities to the IRS, triggering what he knew would be a thorough audit of the clinic. Part of him felt guilty for potentially affecting innocent co-workers, but the larger part of him felt a satisfaction. Actions, he reasoned, should have consequences. As the days passed, Tom found himself struggling with the physical manifestations of his emotional turmoil. He wasn't sleeping well, barely eating, and felt constantly on edge. Looking in the mirror one morning, he hardly recognized the haggard, unkempt man staring back at him. It was this moment of self-reflection that spurred Tom into action. He realized he had let himself go while focusing on work and his marriage. If he was going to come out of this nightmare stronger, he needed to take care of himself. That afternoon, Tom joined a local gym. The physical exertion provided an outlet for his pent-up anger and frustration. As he pushed his body to its limits, he felt a sense of control returning. Control over his body, if not over the chaotic circumstances of his life. The gym also provided an unexpected benefit: social interaction. As Tom became a regular, he found himself chatting with other members, slowly rebuilding the social connections he had neglected during his marriage. These casual interactions reminded him that there was a world beyond his crumbling relationship, people who saw him as more than just Sarah's husband. Encouraged by this, Tom reached out to old friends he had lost touch with over the years. Many were surprised to hear from him, but almost all responded with warmth and concern when they learned of his situation. Invitations for drinks, game nights, and other social gatherings started to fill Tom's previously empty calendar. As Tom lay in bed that night, exhausted from his workout, but more clear-headed than he had been in days, he reflected on the whirlwind of changes. The pain of Sarah's betrayal was still there, a constant ache in his chest. But alongside it, he felt something else growing, a determination to not just survive this ordeal, but to emerge from it stronger and wiser. The seeds of vengeance had been planted, yes, but so too had the seeds of renewal and self-discovery. As Tom drifted off to sleep, he found himself, for the first time since Sarah's betrayal, looking forward to what the next day might bring. The morning sun crept through the blinds, casting long shadows across the empty bedroom. Tom Matthews sat at the edge of the bed, his eyes red-rimmed from another sleepless night. It had been 3 days since Sarah left for her professional development retreat in Aspen, leaving behind a shattered marriage and a husband determined to reclaim control of his life. Tom's mind raced with the events of the past few days. The confrontation, Sarah's cruel words, and the overwhelming evidence of her betrayal. He had spent countless hours replaying every moment, searching for signs he might have missed. But now, as he stared at the neat stack of financial documents on his nightstand, a new resolve hardened within him. With a deep breath, Tom reached for the papers. It was time to take action. Over the next several hours, Tom meticulously combed through their financial records. He created spreadsheets, tracked transactions, and uncovered a web of hidden accounts that Sarah had kept secret. Each discovery felt like a fresh betrayal, but Tom forced himself to remain focused and methodical. "She really thought I wouldn't find these," Tom muttered to himself, shaking his head as he uncovered yet another hidden account. The extent of Sarah's financial deception was staggering, far beyond what he had initially suspected. As the sun began to set, Tom leaned back in his chair, surveying the fruits of his labor. He had compiled a comprehensive document of their assets, including the accounts Sarah believed were hidden. It was a sobering reality check, but Tom felt a small sense of satisfaction. Knowledge, he reminded himself, was power. The next morning, Tom found himself standing in the living room, a small box in his hands. Inside were several discreet, legal hidden cameras. He had agonized over this decision, weighing the moral implications against the need to protect himself. In the end, practicality won out. With careful precision, Tom installed the cameras in the common areas of their home. He positioned them strategically, ensuring they would capture any incriminating admissions without infringing on private spaces. As he worked, Tom couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness. How had their relationship devolved to this point? Once the cameras were in place, Tom turned his attention to his next task. He picked up his phone, scrolling through his contacts until he found the number for Lisa, one of Sarah's colleagues at the physical therapy clinic. Taking a deep breath, he pressed the call button. "Hello, Lisa. It's Tom, Sarah's husband," he said, forcing a cheerful tone into his voice. I'm planning a surprise party for Sarah, and I was hoping you could help me out. Over the next few days, Tom reached out to several of Sarah's co-workers under the guise of party planning. Each conversation was a delicate dance of casual inquiries and subtle probing. Slowly, a picture of Sarah's workplace behavior began to emerge, and it was far from flattering. "Oh, you know Sarah," one colleague laughed nervously, "always rearranging her schedule to work on that special project with Dr. Evan." Another coworker was more direct. "To be honest, Tom, some of us have been worried. It seems like Sarah's been spending more time with Dr. Evan than with her patients lately." Each revelation was a knife to Tom's heart, but he pressed on. He learned that Sarah had been manipulating patient schedules, neglecting her duties to spend more time with Dr. Evan. The extent of their affair's impact on Sarah's professional life was shocking. As Tom pieced together the information from Sarah's colleagues, a new idea began to form. He thought about Dr. Evan's wife, Caroline, a prominent figure in local charity circles. Did she know about her husband's infidelity? With trembling hands, Tom compiled a detailed dossier of the affair. He included screenshots of text messages, financial records, and testimonies from Sarah's colleagues. After triple-checking that the package couldn't be traced back to him, Tom anonymously mailed it to Caroline. The act of sending the dossier left Tom feeling conflicted. Part of him felt guilty for potentially destroying another marriage, but a larger part felt that Caroline deserved to know the truth. As he dropped the package in the mailbox, Tom whispered a quiet apology to the woman he had never met. In the days that followed, Tom found himself struggling with the weight of his actions. The anger and hurt were still there, but they were now tinged with a sense of unease. Was he going too far? Was revenge really the answer? Seeking a constructive outlet for his tumultuous emotions, Tom began volunteering at a local shelter for domestic abuse victims. The decision was partly strategic. It would help build a positive reputation in the community, but as Tom spent more time at the shelter, he found himself genuinely moved by the stories he heard. Working with survivors of abuse gave Tom a new perspective on his own situation. While Sarah's betrayal was painful, he realized that there were people facing far more dire circumstances. This realization didn't diminish his hurt, but it did help him contextualize his pain. As Tom immersed himself in volunteer work, he also decided to seek professional help. He began seeing a therapist, Dr. Rachel Chun, to process his emotions in a healthy way. Their sessions became a safe space for Tom to express his anger, hurt, and confusion without judgment. "What you're feeling is normal, Tom," Dr. Chen assured him during one particularly difficult session. "But it's important to make sure your actions come from a place of self-preservation, not just revenge." Tom nodded, taking her words to heart. He was determined to navigate the situation with as much grace and integrity as possible, even if Sarah hadn't extended him the same courtesy. As the days turned into weeks, Tom felt a shift within himself. The pain of Sarah's betrayal was still there, a constant ache in his chest, but it no longer consumed him. Instead, it fueled a quiet determination to rebuild his life on his own terms. The silent storm of Tom's counterattack was gathering strength, its effects rippling out in ways he couldn't yet foresee. As he lay in bed each night, Tom found himself both dreading and anticipating Sarah's eventual return. The confrontation that awaited would be difficult, but Tom felt prepared. He had weathered the initial shock of betrayal and emerged stronger, more resilient. With this newfound strength, Tom steeled himself for the challenges ahead. The storm he had set in motion was about to break, and he was ready to face whatever came next. While Tom had been meticulously building his case and working on self-improvement, the professional world of Sarah and Dr. Evan was beginning to crumble around them. At the physical therapy clinic, the atmosphere was tense. The IRS investigation, triggered by Tom's anonymous tip, was in full swing. Auditors had set up camp in one of the conference rooms, their presence casting a pall over the entire office. Sarah, who had returned from her Aspen trip expecting to slide back into her normal routine, found herself under intense scrutiny. The auditors had many questions about discrepancies in the financial records, and Sarah struggled to provide satisfactory answers. Ms. Matthews, one stern-faced auditor asked, peering at her over his glasses, "Can you explain these irregular transfers from the clinic's account?" Sarah felt a bead of sweat form on her brow. I'm not sure," she stammered. "That's not really my department. Perhaps you should ask our financial manager." But the financial manager had questions of her own for Sarah, and as the days wore on, the web of deceit Sarah had woven began to unravel. Meanwhile, Dr. Evan was facing his own crisis. The detailed dossier Tom had sent to Caroline had hit its mark, throwing the doctor's personal life into chaos. Caroline, furious and heartbroken, had confronted her husband with irrefutable evidence of his affair. The fallout was immediate and severe. Caroline, leveraging her social connections, began to systematically dismantle the carefully cultivated image Dr. Evan had built. Whispers of his infidelity spread through their social circles, and invitations to charity galas and community events suddenly dried up. At work, Dr. Evan found himself caught between the IRS investigation and his personal crisis. He began to distance himself from Sarah, avoiding her in the hallways and communicating only through terse emails. Sarah, feeling the cold shoulder from her once ardent lover, grew increasingly desperate. She attempted to corner Dr. Evan in his office one afternoon. "Evan, what's going on?" she demanded, her voice tight with anxiety. "Why are you avoiding me?" Dr. Evan wouldn't meet her eyes. "This isn't the time or place, Sarah," he muttered. "We need to keep things professional." "Professional?" Sarah's voice rose, drawing curious glances from passing colleagues. "After everything we've been through?" Dr. Evan finally looked at her, his face a mask of barely controlled panic. "Keep your voice down," he hissed. "This whole thing has gotten out of hand. Caroline knows everything. My reputation is in tatters. We can't. This has to stop." Sarah stared at him in disbelief, the full weight of her choices crashing down on her. As Dr. Evan ushered her out of his office, she realized that her carefully constructed world was crumbling around her. The change in Sarah and Dr. Evan's dynamic did not go unnoticed by their colleagues. The whispers that had started as mere office gossip now took on a more serious tone. Sarah's co-workers, armed with the knowledge of her unethical practices, began documenting her misconduct. Lisa, the colleague Tom had initially reached out to, found herself in a moral quandary. She had always liked Sarah, but the evidence of patient neglect was too serious to ignore. With a heavy heart, she compiled a report detailing Sarah's manipulation of patient schedules and submitted it to the clinic's board. As Sarah's professional world constricted around her, another blow was on its way. Tom, still operating anonymously, tipped off the state medical board about Sarah's neglect of patients in favor of her personal agenda. The medical board took the allegations seriously, launching a formal investigation into Sarah's conduct. Investigators began interviewing patients, reviewing records, and observing Sarah's work firsthand. The effects of Sarah's neglect soon became apparent. Patients, some of whom had been with the clinic for years, began to notice a decline in the quality of care they received. Appointments were rushed, treatment seemed less effective, and Sarah's once warm bedside manner had turned cold and distracted. One longtime patient, Mrs. Eleanor Roth, finally spoke up during a particularly rushed session. "Sarah, dear," she said, her voice tinged with concern, "is everything all right? You seem different lately." Sarah, caught off guard by the direct question, felt a lump form in her throat. "I'm fine, Mrs. Roth," she managed to say, "just a bit busy with a new project." But Mrs. Roth wasn't convinced. After her appointment, she requested to speak with another therapist, citing concerns about her treatment plan. This scene played out repeatedly over the following weeks. Patients began requesting different therapists, and complaints started to pile up on the clinic manager's desk. The once stellar reputation of the clinic began to suffer. Local doctors, who had long referred their patients to the clinic, began to hesitate. Dr. Thompson, a well-respected orthopedic surgeon, voiced his concerns during a staff meeting at the local hospital. I'm not sure what's going on over there, he said, frowning. But I've had 3 patients in the last month complain about their experiences. Until they sort out whatever's going on, I think we should consider other options for physical therapy referrals. The snowball effect was in full force. As the clinic's reputation suffered, the pressure on Sarah intensified. She found herself working longer hours, desperately trying to keep up with her patient load, while also fielding questions from the IRS auditors and the medical board investigators. The stress began to take its toll. Sarah, once known for her steady hands and calm demeanor, started making mistakes. During one session, distracted by yet another text from her lawyer, she applied too much pressure during a manipulation, causing her patient considerable pain. The patient, a college athlete recovering from a shoulder injury, yelped in pain. "What the hell?" he exclaimed, clutching his shoulder. "That really hurt." Sarah, horrified by her mistake, tried to apologize, but the damage was done. The patient left in anger, and within hours, a formal complaint had been filed with the clinic's board. This incident was the final straw. The clinic's board, already under pressure from the ongoing investigations, called an emergency meeting. The decision was unanimous. Sarah would be placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the formal investigation into her conduct. As Sarah cleared out her desk, the full weight of her actions finally seemed to hit her. Colleagues she had once considered friends now averted their eyes as she passed. Dr. Evan, the man she had risked everything for, was nowhere to be seen. With her cardboard box of personal items in her arms, Sarah walked out of the clinic, unsure if she would ever return. The professional fallout of her choices was complete, leaving her career in shambles and her future uncertain. As she drove home, Sarah couldn't help but wonder how things had spiraled so far out of control. Little did she know, the personal reckoning awaiting her at home would make her professional troubles pale in comparison. Sarah's hands trembled as she inserted her key into the front door lock. The drive home from the clinic had been a blur, her mind reeling from the day's events. As she pushed open the door, she was struck by an eerie silence that seemed to permeate the house. "Tom?" she called out, her voice echoing in the empty foyer. There was no response. Sarah made her way to the kitchen, her heels clicking on the hardwood floors. As she rounded the corner, she froze. There, on the kitchen island, lay a stack of papers. Her heart pounding, she approached slowly, already guessing what they might be. The top sheet confirmed her fears. Divorce papers. Sarah's legs gave out, and she collapsed onto a nearby stool. With shaking hands, she began to leaf through the documents, each page a damning testament to the destruction of her marriage. But it wasn't just the divorce papers that made Sarah's blood run cold. Attached to them was a thick folder labeled evidence. With growing horror, Sarah flipped through page after page of damning information. Screenshots of her intimate text messages with Dr. Evan, bank statements showing her financial deceit, and statements from her colleagues detailing her professional misconduct. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. How had Tom discovered all of this? As if in answer to her unspoken question, she heard the front door open. Tom's footsteps echoed through the house, steady and purposeful. Sarah looked up as he entered the kitchen, his face a mask of calm determination. "Hello, Sarah," Tom said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I see you found the papers." Sarah stood up, her legs unsteady. "Tom, I can explain." "Can you?" Tom interrupted, his tone sharp. "Can you explain the affair? The embezzlement? The way you've neglected your patients and destroyed your professional reputation?" Sarah flinched at each accusation, realizing the full extent of Tom's knowledge. She had underestimated him, believed him too trusting, too oblivious to uncover her deceptions. Now, faced with the consequences of her actions, she felt a desperate need to regain control of the situation. "You went through my private messages?" she accused, trying to muster some righteous indignation. "You spied on me?" Tom's laugh was cold and humorless. "That's what you're focusing on. Your privacy?" He shook his head in disbelief. "You lost any right to privacy when you decided to cheat on me and steal from your workplace. Sarah's mind raced, searching for a way out. She thought about the early days of their marriage, the love they had shared. Perhaps if she appealed to those memories. "Tom, please," she said, softening her voice. "We can work this out. I made mistakes. I know that, but we've been through so much together. Don't throw away our marriage over one indiscretion." Tom's expression hardened. "One indiscretion? Sarah, you've been carrying on an affair for months. You've lied to me, stolen money, and neglected your patients. This isn't a mistake. It's a systematic betrayal of everything we built together." As Tom spoke, Sarah felt her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. The reality of her actions, laid bare by Tom's words, hit her with full force. In a desperate attempt to regain some control, she lashed out. "You want to know why I did it?" she shouted, her composure finally breaking. "Because you were never there, always working, always focused on your precious construction projects. Evan made me feel alive, appreciated. He understood my ambition." Tom remained unerringly calm in the face of her outburst. "I've been sleeping in the guest room for weeks, Sarah. Did you even notice?" Sarah blinked, caught off guard by this revelation. She hadn't noticed. She had been so caught up in her affair, in the excitement of her secret life, that she had failed to see the changes in her own home. I didn't," she stammered. "Of course you didn't," Tom said, his voice tinged with sadness. "You were too busy destroying our marriage and your career to notice anything beyond your own selfish desires." Something in Tom's tone, the mixture of disappointment and resolve, sparked a surge of rage in Sarah. All the stress, fear, and frustration of the past weeks came crashing down on her at once. "You think you're so perfect, don't you?" she spat, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "Well, let me tell you something, Tom. I don't regret a single moment with Evan. He gave me what you never could: excitement, passion, ambition." As soon as the words left her mouth, Sarah knew she had made a terrible mistake. She saw a flash of pain in Tom's eyes, quickly replaced by a cold determination. "Thank you for your honesty, Sarah," Tom said calmly, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small remote. "I think that about covers everything we need." With a sinking feeling, Sarah watched as Tom pressed a button on the remote. A small red light blinked to life on what she had assumed was a smoke detector in the corner of the kitchen. You've been recording me?" Sarah gasped, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. Tom nodded, his face impassive. "Legal. Hidden cameras in the common areas of the house. I had hoped I wouldn't need them, that you'd be honest with me. But I guess old habits die hard for you, don't they?" Sarah's mind raced, replaying everything she had said since entering the house. With horror, she realized she had inadvertently confessed to both the affair and the embezzlement, all caught on camera. "You can't use that," she said weakly, knowing even as she spoke that it was a futile protest. "Actually, I can," Tom replied. "My lawyer assures me that it's all perfectly admissible in court. Your little outburst just made our case that much stronger." Sarah felt the last vestiges of control slipping away from her. In a desperate bid to regain some leverage, she reached for her phone. "I'm calling Evan," she announced, her fingers shaking as she scrolled through her contacts. "He'll know what to do. He'll support me." Tom watched silently as Sarah put the phone to her ear. The call went straight to voicemail. Frowning, Sarah tried again with the same result. "He's probably in a meeting," she muttered, more to herself than to Tom. She opened her messaging app, quickly typing out a plea for help. Message not delivered flashed on the screen. "No," Sarah whispered, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. No. "He's blocked you, Sarah," Tom said quietly. "Dr. Evan is trying to save his own skin. He won't be riding to your rescue." Sarah sank to the floor, her phone slipping from her grasp. She looked up at Tom, seeing him clearly for the first time in months. Gone was the man she had dismissed as boring and unambitious. In his place stood someone stronger, more resilient than she had ever given him credit for. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tom picked up the divorce papers from the counter. Now you sign these. My lawyer will be in touch about the division of assets, though given the evidence of your embezzlement, I don't think you'll be in a position to contest much. He moved towards a door, pausing to pick up a suitcase Sarah hadn't noticed before. I'm moving out, he announced. I've found an apartment. You can stay here for now, but fair warning, given your financial situation, I doubt you'll be able to afford it for long. Sarah watched, numb with shock, as Tom walked to the front door. He turned back one last time, his hand on the doorknob. I loved you, Sarah, he said softly. I would have given you the world if you'd only asked. Instead, you chose to take it for yourself, no matter who you hurt in the process. I hope it was worth it. With that, Tom walked out, closing the door quietly behind him. The soft click of the latch echoed through the empty house, a final punctuation mark on the end of their marriage. Sarah remained on the kitchen floor, surrounded by the evidence of her betrayals and the ruins of the life she had so recklessly destroyed. As the reality of her situation settled over her like a heavy shroud, she realized that her impulsive actions had cost her everything: her marriage, her career, her reputation, and her future. In the growing darkness of the house, she could no longer afford. Sarah Matthews faced the consequences of her actions alone, the architect of her own downfall. The courthouse loomed before Sarah, its imposing facade a stark reminder of the gravity of her situation. She smoothed down her suit jacket, a designer piece that now felt like a relic from a different life. At her side stood Marcus Delgado, the aggressive divorce attorney she had hired in a last-ditch effort to salvage something from the wreckage of her life. Remember, Marcus whispered as they ascended the courthouse steps, we're painting Tom as controlling and abusive. Your actions were a desperate attempt to escape his oppression. Stick to the story. Sarah nodded, trying to quell the nausea rising in her throat. She knew it was a lie, a fabrication born of desperation, but it felt like her only chance. As they entered the courtroom, Sarah's eyes immediately found Tom. He sat at the plaintiff's table, his posture relaxed but alert. The months since their separation had changed him. He looked fitter, more confident. The sight sent a pang through Sarah's heart, a mix of regret and something uncomfortably close to attraction. The proceedings began, and Marcus launched into his opening statement with theatrical flair. He wove a tale of a oppressed wife, driven to desperate measures by her controlling husband. Sarah watched the jury's faces, hoping to see sympathy, but found only skepticism. Then it was Tom's turn. His lawyer, a composed woman named Janet Chun, began methodically presenting evidence. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face as screenshots of her intimate messages with Dr. Evan were displayed on a large screen. The jury members' expressions hardened as they read the damning exchanges, but it was Tom's testimony that truly shattered Sarah's hopes. He took the stand with a calm demeanor that stood in sharp contrast to Sarah's increasing agitation. As he spoke, his voice steady and clear, Sarah realized just how meticulously he had documented her betrayal. Mr. Matthews, Janet Chin asked, can you tell the court about the financial discrepancies you discovered? Tom nodded, his expression grave. I found irregular transfers from our joint account to a hidden savings account in Sarah's name. Further investigation revealed that she had been embezzling funds from the physical therapy clinic where she worked. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Sarah felt Marcus stiffen beside her. This was not part of the narrative they had prepared. As the trial progressed, a parade of witnesses took the stand, each one driving another nail into the coffin of Sarah's case. Her colleagues from the clinic testified about her manipulation of patient schedules and neglect of duties. Patients spoke of declined care quality and betrayed trust. Sarah's heart sank further when she saw Dr. Evan enter the courtroom, subpoenaed to testify. She tried to catch his eye, to silently plead for support, but he studiously avoided her gaze. On the stand, Dr. Evans' testimony was a masterclass in self-preservation. He downplayed their relationship, characterizing it as a momentary lapse in judgment that he deeply regretted. It was a mistake, he said, his eyes flicking to where his wife Caroline sat in the gallery. "One that nearly cost me my marriage and my reputation. I take full responsibility for my actions and have been working to rebuild trust with my wife." Sarah felt as if she'd been slapped. The man she had risked everything for was now treating her like a regrettable footnote in his life story. The final blow came when the court-appointed financial auditor presented his findings. The full scope of Sarah's embezzlement was laid bare, the numbers stark and damning on the courtroom screen. Sarah heard a sharp intake of breath from Tom's direction and realized that even he hadn't known the full extent of her financial crimes. As the trial neared its conclusion, Sarah took the stand in a last, desperate attempt to sway the jury. But under the skilled cross-examination of Janet Chin, her carefully constructed narrative quickly unraveled. She found herself stumbling over contradictions, her testimony growing increasingly erratic as she tried to maintain her lies in the face of overwhelming evidence. The jury's deliberation was shockingly brief. When they returned, the foreman's voice was clear and unequivocal as he read the verdict. The judge, his face stern, cited Sarah's infidelity, financial crimes, and attempts at perjury as he granted Tom a highly favorable settlement. Furthermore, the judge continued, his voice cutting through Sarah's daze of disbelief, "Mrs. Matthews is hereby ordered to repay all embezzled funds and cover Mr. Matthews' considerable legal fees." The gavel fell with a sound of finality. Sarah sat, stunned, as the implications washed over her. She was facing not just the loss of her marriage and reputation, but financial ruin as well. As the courtroom began to empty, she caught sight of Tom conferring quietly with his lawyer, his expression a mix of relief and lingering sadness. For a moment, their eyes met across the room. Sarah saw no triumph in Tom's gaze, only a profound weariness. Then he turned away, walking out of the courtroom, and Sarah realized with a sinking heart, out of her life for good. The weeks following the trial were a blur for Sarah. She moved through her days in a haze, barely registering the whispers that followed her everywhere she went. It wasn't until she stopped by her favorite coffee shop one morning that the full weight of her new reality came crashing down. As Sarah pushed open the door, the usual hum of conversation abruptly ceased. All eyes turned to her, a mix of curiosity, judgment, and barely concealed disdain. The barista, a young woman who had always greeted Sarah with a warm smile, now regarded her with cool professionalism. "What can I get for you?" she asked, her tone clipped. Sarah mumbled her order, acutely aware of the stares boring into her back. As she waited for her coffee, she overheard snatches of hushed conversations. "Can you believe the nerve?" showing her face here. "I heard she stole thousands from the clinic. Poor Tom, he deserved better." Cheeks burning, Sarah grabbed her coffee and fled, the bell above the door tinkling mockingly behind her. As she hurried down the street, she realized that news of her scandalous divorce had spread through their small town like wildfire, and public opinion had turned firmly against her. Meanwhile, across town, Tom was experiencing a very different reception. He stood before a group of volunteers at the local domestic abuse shelter, outlining plans for a new project to upgrade the facility's security systems. "Tom, this is incredible," gushed Maria, the shelter's director. "Your expertise is going to make such a difference for our residents." Tom smiled, a hint of color rising in his cheeks at the praise. "I'm just happy to help," he said sincerely. "This place does such important work." As he left the shelter later that afternoon, Tom found himself reflecting on how much his life had changed in the past few months. The volunteer work had started as a way to keep busy and rebuild his reputation, but it had become so much more. It gave him a sense of purpose, a way to channel his pain into something positive. The contrast between Tom and Sarah's experiences in the community couldn't have been starker. Where Sarah found closed doors and turned backs, Tom was welcomed with open arms. His dedication to the shelter had earned him a reputation as a pillar of the community, someone who had faced adversity with grace and emerged stronger. For Sarah, the public humiliation was relentless. She faced dirty looks and whispered comments everywhere she went. Former friends crossed the street to avoid her. Patients she had treated for years now refused to make eye contact if they passed her on the sidewalk. One particularly painful incident occurred at the local grocery store. Sarah was perusing the produce section when she heard a familiar voice. She looked up to see Caroline, Dr. Evans' wife, engaged in animated conversation with a group of women Sarah had once considered friends. As Caroline noticed Sarah, her eyes narrowed. She made a show of looking Sarah up and down before turning back to her companions. "Ladies," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the aisle, "let's continue this discussion at my place. The air in here seems to have gotten a bit stale." The group moved away, several of them throwing contemptuous glances over their shoulders at Sarah. Caroline's message was clear. Sarah was now persona non grata in the social circles she had once frequented. Tom, unaware of Sarah's struggles, was focused on healing and growth. Recognizing the therapeutic value of his own journey, he decided to start a support group for people dealing with infidelity. The first meeting was held in a community center meeting room, and Tom was surprised by the turnout. As he looked around the circle of faces, some tear-stained, others set in determination, Tom felt a surge of empathy. "Welcome, everyone," he began, his voice gentle but strong. "I know the pain that brought each of you here tonight, but I also know that there's hope and healing on the other side of betrayal. We're here to support each other through that journey." The group meetings quickly became a highlight of Tom's week. There was something profoundly healing about sharing his story and listening to others who truly understood. It provided a constructive outlet for the lingering pain and anger, allowing Tom to process his emotions in a healthy way. Sarah, desperate to rebuild her shattered image, attempted to join local organizations. She volunteered for the annual charity fund run, only to be told that all positions had been filled. She offered to help with the library's literacy program, but was informed that they were restructuring their volunteer system. Each rejection was polite but firm, leaving Sarah in no doubt that she was no longer welcome in the community she had once called home. As autumn turned to winter, Sarah's isolation grew. She spent most of her time alone in the house she could barely afford, venturing out only when necessary. The contrast with her previous life, busy, social, filled with what she had thought was purpose, was stark and painful. Tom, on the other hand, found his calendar increasingly full. Between his volunteer work, the support group, and a renewed focus on his career, he hardly had a moment to dwell on the past. His journey of healing and growth had not gone unnoticed. One crisp December morning, Tom was surprised to find a journalist from the local newspaper waiting outside the shelter. "Mr. Matthews?" the young reporter called, hurrying to catch up with Tom. "I'm Jake from the Oakville Gazette. We'd love to do a feature on your work here at the shelter and your support group. Would you be willing to sit for an interview?" Tom hesitated, uncomfortable with the idea of publicity, but Maria, overhearing the exchange, chimed in enthusiastically. "Oh, Tom, you must do it. Think of how many people you could help by sharing your story." Reluctantly, Tom agreed. The resulting article, published a week later, was a glowing account of Tom's journey from betrayed husband to community leader. It detailed his volunteer work, the success of his support group, and the personal growth he had achieved in the face of adversity. The article was the talk of the town, further cementing Tom's positive reputation. For Sarah, who read the piece with a mixture of regret and resentment, it was a painful reminder of everything she had lost. As she sat in her quiet house, the newspaper crumpled in her lap, Sarah was forced to confront the full consequences of her actions. She had not only lost her marriage and her career, but also her place in the community. The life she had taken for granted was gone, replaced by isolation and regret. Tom, unaware of Sarah's turmoil, continued to move forward. The article had brought new members to his support group and increased donations to the shelter. As he stood before the group at their next meeting, Tom felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in months. "Our pasts don't define us," he told the attentive faces before him. "It's how we choose to move forward that matters. Each of you has the strength to rebuild, to find happiness again. I'm living proof that there's life after betrayal. As Tom's words resonated through the room, Sarah sat alone in her darkened living room, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. The contrast between their two paths had never been clearer, and for Sarah, the road ahead seemed impossibly long and lonely. The harsh January wind whipped around Sarah as she stood on the sidewalk, staring up at the imposing office building before her. Inside, she knew, Tom was meeting with his lawyer to finalize the last details of their divorce. Sarah hugged herself tightly, as much for emotional comfort as for warmth. The past few months had been a downward spiral for Sarah. Jobless, her reputation in tatters, and facing mounting legal bills, she had finally reached her breaking point. Today, swallowing the last remnants of her pride, she had come to beg Tom for financial help. As if summoned by her thoughts, the office building's doors swung open, and Tom emerged. He stopped short when he saw Sarah, surprise flickering across his face before it settled into a carefully neutral expression. "Sarah," he said, his tone even, "what are you doing here?" Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Tom, I need to talk to you. Please." Tom hesitated for a moment before nodding. "All right, there's a coffee shop around the corner. We can talk there." The walk to the coffee shop was silent, the tension between them palpable. Once seated with their drinks, Sarah found herself struggling to meet Tom's eyes. "Tom, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need help. The legal bills, the restitution. I can't keep up with it all. I know I have no right to ask, but is there any way you could help me financially? Just to get back on my feet." Tom's expression remained impassive as he listened. When Sarah finished, he was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee absently. "Sarah," he finally said, his voice firm but not unkind, "I'm sorry you're struggling, but I can't help you. Your actions have consequences, and these are yours to face." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. "But Tom, I don't know what to do. I can't find work. I can barely afford to eat." Tom shook his head, cutting her off gently. "Sarah, you made your choices. You chose to have an affair, to embezzle money, to lie in court. Those were your decisions, and now you have to live with the results. It's not my responsibility to shield you from the consequences of your actions." As the finality of Tom's words sank in, Sarah felt the last glimmer of hope fade away. She nodded mutely, not trusting herself to speak. Tom stood, picking up his coat. "I truly hope you find a way to turn things around, Sarah. But it has to come from you, not from me or anyone else." With that, he walked out of the coffee shop, leaving Sarah alone with her cold coffee and the weight of her choices. The next few weeks passed in a blur for Sarah. She went through the motions of daily life, applying for jobs she knew she wouldn't get, dodging calls from creditors, and trying to ignore the persistent rumor that the state medical board was nearing a decision on her case. It was a gloomy Tuesday afternoon when the letter arrived. Sarah's hands shook as she opened the official-looking envelope, though she already knew what it would say. The state medical board had concluded its investigation. Sarah's physical therapy license was permanently revoked. As the reality of the situation crashed over her, Sarah sank to the floor, the letter clutched in her trembling hands. This was it, the final blow to her professional life. Without her license, the career she had spent years building was gone forever. Across town, Tom was in his office at the construction company, reviewing plans for his latest project when his phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline made him pause. Local construction foreman tapped for major charitable project. Tom clicked on the article, his eyes widening as he read. He had been chosen to lead a significant construction project for a well-known charitable organization in another state. It was an incredible opportunity, a chance to use his skills to make a real difference on a larger scale than ever before. As the news sank in, Tom felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. This was a new chapter, a fresh start far from the painful memories of the past year. But it also meant leaving behind the community that had supported him through his darkest times. Over the next few weeks, Tom threw himself into preparations for the move. He handed over leadership of the support group to a capable member, ensuring its continued success. He said goodbye to the shelter staff, promising to stay in touch and continue supporting their work from afar. On his last day in town, Tom decided to take a final drive around the familiar streets. As he passed by his old house, Sarah's house now, he was surprised to see a for sale sign in the yard. On impulse, he pulled over. Sarah was in the front yard, talking to a real estate agent, when she spotted Tom's car. She froze, watching as he got out and approached. "You're selling the house?" Tom asked, his tone neutral. Sarah nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "I have to. I can't afford it anymore, and with everything that's happened, it's time for a fresh start." Tom was quiet for a moment, taking in the sight of the home they had once shared, now a symbol of all that had changed. "I'm leaving town," he said finally. "Got a job offer in another state. I start next month." Sarah looked up, surprise and something like regret flickering across her face. "Oh," she said softly. Congratulations, Tom. You deserve it." An awkward silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken words and shared history. Tom shifted uncomfortably, suddenly unsure why he had stopped. "Thanks," he said finally. "I hope things work out for you, Sarah. I really do." Sarah nodded, blinking back tears. "Tom, she began, then hesitated. "I know it doesn't change anything, but I am sorry. For everything." Tom's expression softened slightly. "I appreciate that, Sarah. And you're right, it doesn't change what happened. But I hope you can learn from it and find a way to move forward." As Tom turned to leave, Sarah called out, her voice trembling. "Tom, wait. I know I have no right to ask this, but is there any chance at all that we could try again? I've changed, I swear. I've learned my lesson." Tom paused, his back to Sarah, for a fleeting moment. He remembered the good times they had shared in that house, the dreams they had built together. But then the memories of betrayal, lies, and cruelty flooded back. He turned to face Sarah, his expression compassionate but firm. "Sarah, I'm sorry, but no. Too much has happened. I've forgiven you, or at least I'm working on it. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. We can't go back." Sarah's face crumpled, the last vestiges of hope fading from her eyes. "I understand," she whispered. Tom nodded, then walked back to his car. As he opened the door, he looked back one last time. "Goodbye, Sarah. I truly hope you find peace." With that, Tom got into his car and drove away, leaving Sarah standing alone in the yard of the house that had once been their home. As Tom's car disappeared around the corner, Sarah felt a profound sense of finality wash over her. This was it. The last time she would ever see the man she had so callously betrayed. She turned back to the real estate agent, wiping away a stray tear. "I'm sorry about that. Where were we?" Meanwhile, Tom drove through town, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. He felt a sense of closure after his encounter with Sarah, but also a renewed determination to embrace this new chapter of his life. He pulled up to his apartment, where boxes were stacked neatly, ready for the move. As he climbed out of the car, his phone buzzed with a text from his new employer, confirming the details of his start date. Tom smiled, feeling a surge of excitement for the future. He was about to reply when he noticed a figure approaching, a courier with an official-looking envelope. "Thomas Matthews?" the courier asked. "Yes, that's me," Tom replied, puzzled. "Please sign here," the courier said, handing over a clipboard. Tom signed and took the envelope, his curiosity piqued. As the courier walked away, he tore it open, his eyes widening as he read the contents. It was a notice from the federal prosecutor's office. Sarah was being indicted on federal charges related to her financial crimes at the clinic. The prosecutor was reaching out to Tom as a potential witness. Tom leaned against his car, the weight of this new information settling over him. He felt a complex mix of emotions, shock, sadness, and a sense of justice being served. As the sun began to set, Casting long shadows across the street, Tom made a decision. He would cooperate with the prosecution if needed, but he wouldn't let this development derail his plans. He had a new life waiting for him, and it was time to embrace it fully. Tom took a deep breath, pocketed the notice, and walked into his apartment. He had packing to finish and a future to prepare for. As he closed the door behind him, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he was ready to face them. Across town, unaware of the legal storm about to break over her, Sarah sat alone in her empty house, surrounded by the remnants of her old life. As the reality of her situation sank in, she realized that the consequences of her actions were far from over. The road ahead would be hard, but for the first time, she truly understood that it was a road she would have to walk alone. As night fell over the town, two lives that had once been intertwined continued on their separate paths. Tom, looking forward to a future bright with possibility, and Sarah, facing the daunting task of rebuilding her life from the ground up. The story of their marriage had ended, but for both of them, a new chapter was just beginning. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.